So we're going to have an evening tonight. I'd like for you to have an open question and answer session with me here right now. And please, someone ask me a question or two, and I'll get into trying to answer it for you. Okay? Yes, Robert.
Did Jerry Smith?
Jerry Smith.
Jerry
yeah.
Smith. Did he ever come out? I know
Jerry
he came out
Jerry said he
anonymously,
was a very unlucky guy. And you look at that a lot of ways. Jerry, certainly, I look at my gayness both as a blessing and being unlucky at a time that it was. But it also is what it is. And I've often, there was a fellow that did an article in the Los Angeles Times a number of years ago about myself. And in it I talked about a little bit more explicitly about sex. And he called it getting over it, and getting over his own homophobia. This was a straight fellow that wrote it. And I says, well, you know, I have lived on both sides of the fence, and I certainly loved my wife when I married her, and I loved different women when I was with them. Rose Bowl Queen, that I didn't make love to, but I certainly liked her body. She had a great body. And I certainly dated Miss Washington and had some lovely ladies that I was able to play with and enjoy and love. And certainly, I don't consider myself bisexual, but I do consider myself a sexual being. And I think we're all sexual beings. The entire animal world is sexual beings. And certainly, if you have motivation enough, you can live how you want to live, but that doesn't change your orientation at all. Everybody still has an orientation, whether it be straight, gay, bi, or whatever. But anyway,
I think, when was it? About 2 years ago that the NFL Network did
yes, 2 years ago,
biography of Jerry Smith. So.
Right. You know,
I think it's still available.
This past few years, with Jason Collins speaking out in basketball and then playing a whole year, and then Michael Sam, I have never been recycled so much in my entire life, and that's another reason. That's another reason I have kind of got disappeared, Robert, because I got so totally drained and overwhelmed with requests. I did things for BBC that went all over the world, you know. I'm going to Austin, Texas. They did Canada, guys from Canada came down and did a documentary and spent 15 hours at my house one day. KCAL News, I mean, there's all kinds of things, you know, you got to do. And you do them, and hopefully they will edit things correctly and get things put together so you don't look like a total fool, you know what I mean? But it's hard when you're totally revealing yourself to stand up and be counted, you know? But I am so glad that I have. And I was up at the Gay Pride, there's a group called the Front Runners. And you wouldn't believe, I went up to 2 years ago in San Francisco and took part in their, they have different categories from, you know, the kids race to 12 years old, 16, 21, 30, 40, 50, 60, all the way up to 80 years old, different groups of guys running in this race in around the park there. And you wouldn't believe how many folks in different ages wanted to come over and talk about where they were when they first heard the news about a gay football player, or how they snuck my book out of their drugstore to read, or read it on the side, or just told these stories that were really kind of wonderful in a way, and also sad that that's how they had to be exposed to knowing about someone in the National Football League. But anyway, how about a...
If you would please indulge me in something I wrote back in June of 2004. And I probably going to get this name wrong, so forgive me if I do. Ezra Truolo.
Ezra Tulololo, yeah.
Thank you. Selected by the Green Bay Packers in the second round, 35th pick overall of the 1991 NFL Draft. Resigned by the Minnesota Vikings as a free agent on March the 7th, 1995. Born in Honolulu, Hawaii, has sung the national anthem at several sporting events. Super Bowl 33 with the Atlanta Falcons. 2-year letterman in track, wrestling and football,
All
as
Pacific
fullback
Coast.
and linebacker.
First team All Pacific Coast, yeah.
Defensive Player of the Year for California and all Pomona Valley honors. Was inspired by the Dave Kopay story, the autobiography of the first pro footballer to come out back in 1977. Ezra Truolo and his life partner Mitchell Worley have 2 adopted twins, Mitchell and Michelle.
Ezra is such a dear friend. I just saw him at a symposium at USC here last year, and there's not one time when I see him that he doesn't come over and give me a big hug and squeeze and tell him about how I saved his life. And it's so meaningful. It's just amazing. I mean, Ezra is one of these guys who's bigger than, I mean, he is so full of life, and he lives a little too hard, and now he's got his he's finally coming into himself, and he's kind of gotten away from his drinking and carousing days, and he's really he's a professional speaker, and he's really, really good at it, and wants to be into it. He's also very religious and very into preaching humanity. He's really, really a wonderful guy, and I'm proud to be his friend. And I asked Billie Jean 2 years ago. They did or 3 or oh hell, it's longer than that now. It was before I left Los Angeles, and that's 5 years ago almost. Right before I retired, what's her name? Mary Carrillo asked me. She says, Dave, would you like to be part of we're honoring Billie Jean at the theater, the Archlight Theater here, and would you like to come meet her? And I said, oh, I'd love to. And I went to meet her, and she was part of the documentary Profiles in Courage. Did you see that? Billie Jean King was voted as one of the most powerful women in the world that year. Billie Jean. And she says, I went and I said, Billie Jean, I says, I was working here at Linoleum City, and I'd be reading about your girlfriend and you, and I couldn't understand why you couldn't talk about her. And I said, I so wish that you had done it. And she says, Dave, you know how it was. You know how it is. I says, you know, you're right, but I had to share that with you. And she said, but you know what? Without your book, I don't know where I would be. And that was really, so I know what I've done in the National Football League when that NFL Network show about Jerry Smith, if any of you get a chance to see it or research it, it's really worthwhile seeing. It's probably the most positive thing the NFL has ever done. But then again, they had to get a few little shots in there, you know. But so be it, you know.
Do you ever hear from foreign athletes who are gay and their struggles? And if so, is there one story or two that sticks out in your mind from the ones that you've heard about?
I haven't heard of Florida athletes per se, specifically. I had a friend that was a colonel in the Marine Corps. He wound up retiring after Iraq when he made a colonel, and told me about I was involved with him and his wife in those days, and it was a wonderful little love affair for a few weekends. But Jim was never very comfortable with it, and I kind of let it go. And I just kind of let the whole thing go because it wasn't just meant to be. They weren't public figures, and they couldn't have dealt with the hoopla after something like that. I would definitely love to include them in what I wanted to do in Don't Die Wondering and some of the experiences that I've had. Maybe now that my mom's dead, maybe she'd be smiling from heaven if that's where she is. I hope My mom was a really, really tough woman, and I'm not 100% sure she's there, but I know, no, believe me, if there is a heaven, I know my mom is there, because she had to be one of the strongest, toughest people I know, and that's probably how I've had to recognize that after she's gone, because my mom was something else. And just yesterday, Robert, I got word that my mom's house is going to be in escrow, and I'm the one who's got to deal with all that and then get things to my siblings, and I will. But that's the last thing that I'm dealing with, and in terms of the hands-on issue, I'll be dealing with her memory and our relationship my whole rest of my life, I'm sure. She had a dog, a couple of dogs. My dad had Monique and Mitzi, and my dad loved those dogs, and my mom disliked them just about as much. But anyway, but you know what? She still, after my dad passed, she did take care of that dog and loved it, and made sure it was comfortable when it died. My mom was. This might be a real. The last day my mom was alive, I want to share this with you because I think it's important to talk about it. I was at the hospital, Huntington Memorial Hospital in Pasadena is maybe one of the great hospitals I've ever been to. I have been in a lot of hospitals. I've got both hips replaced, my knee replaced, my shoulder replaced, and I had 4 knee operations before that, and I had operations on everything else before that too. So, I mean, I've been in a lot of hospitals, and I know hospitals, but this place was unbelievable. And that's where she passed away at. When she, her last night that I was there, it wasn't her last night, it was like the night before her last night. And she was really failing because she was on they had a catheter, and she wasn't getting out of bed, and she was getting out, she was getting air all the time, and her lungs were failing. And I said, so it was maybe 2 or 3 days before the doctor says, Dave, she's shutting down. I says, well, then why do the nurses keep calling me and wanting to put more IVs in her? Because she couldn't stand all the pain with all the IVs going into her. I says, stop the craziness. This is nuts. Well, my friend, I was with Alex when he passed away, a few hours before he passed away. And I had no other friends that lived for almost 9 months on morphine when they had AIDS and were really suffering. And believe me, folks, you can live for 9 months on morphine and be totally sane. You also can be totally high, and it's the most unbelievable feeling you've ever had in your life, because I've had morphine for like a day or two with some of my operations. I needed morphine. There's no way, but I stopped it, and I knew I would stop it right away. Well, my mom has heard lots of these stories that you get on morphine and then you're going to die. Well, guess what, Mom? But when we went into the hospital, she looked at me, and this was at the ER, and this place is, I'm telling you, it's the most efficient place you've ever seen. And they put all these things in her, and they were wanting to do all this other stuff, and I said, no more, that's it. And she said, Dave, is this it? This is it, isn't it? I says, yes, Mom, I think this is it. And I says, you know, you've beaten them before, but maybe this is it. And she looked at me, she didn't say anything else. And they proceeded to do a couple of other tests. And this time, at that moment, because of the weakness I guess I was in the ER room, I did let them stick 1 IV in her, and she was screaming, and it was such pain, and I said, oh my God. So we get up to her room, it's a fabulous room, it's like a hotel suite. And I said, Mom, she said, and I said, I don't want any more. I said, Mom, I absolutely agree. Totally, no more IVs, nothing. And so anyhow, she says, we realized that she hadn't eaten anything all day, and I'm thinking, well, what's the use of her eating? And she's not going to be here with us much longer. And I says, well, I'm hungry as hell. And you could call and ask any food you wanted in this place. It was not like a regular hospital. You just order what you want. I says, Mom, what do you want? And she said, I says, Mom, you want me to order? I says, yeah, go ahead. I says, Mom, how about some mashed potatoes with loads of butter and some good scrambled eggs? And she said, yes, perfect. So here we are. It took a little bit for him to come. And the eggs, a big load of eggs and mashed potatoes and lots of butter. And I'm feeding it to her, and she kind of trying to push the fork over to me, and she's smiling, and she's on morphine now. Let me tell you, I knew she was in a good place, And that wasn't her chill pills working, because we had to fight like hell to get her back on her chill pills. That was another story. Because she was afraid to death of chill pills, that. But anyhow, and she said, here, my sissy boy. That's exactly what I did. I started laughing my ass off. I couldn't believe it. And then I thought, and later on I would cry like hell too. I just said, Ma, what did you say? Because I never, ever let my mother ever get away with a homophobic or a racist slur. Believe me. Because she knew, I brought black fellas and teammates to my house, and she was always as pleasant as you could be, believe me, with my friends that I bring home. And she was always good with the people at the, down in her business where she worked, where she eventually was buried out of. Pierce Brothers National Mortuary, and now it's called Valhalla or something else. But anyhow, it was amazing. But you know what? Where she got this business of sissy boy? It was from the shrink that I stopped seeing when I finally decided to marry my wife when I was going to training camp, who was Dr. William Jennings Bryan III, the head guy. He had degrees from every place. He was the president of the American Medical Hypnosis Association. This guy had Sunset Boulevard offices, fabulous, He was nuts, and that's what I told him too. And this was after months and months of therapy, But I was getting there's a lot of good in hypnosis, believe me. I mean, a whole lot, because it goes into your soul in a way that you can't even believe. And you go into yourself, and you got to examine yourself. And this is, I think, where I got the strength eventually to finally speak out when I was desperate in Washington, D.C., and realizing that I wasn't going to get this business off the ground, and that I needed to make a life for myself and be honest as to who I was. And that's when I decided to speak out. But I knew I wasn't going to make a life being a political figure or a national spokesperson either. I kept it quiet, really, in a lot of ways, and that's what I've done. And so, but the doctor had called my mom up and says, "There's no way in hell your son is a sissy." Well, at that time I was worried about being called a sissy too, But after meeting some gay friends and stuff, we all accept that mantle as being whatever the hell we are. It doesn't matter. What difference would it be if you called a sissy? That's the biggest joke in the world if you want to make a difference out of it. It's ridiculous, So who cares if they call you a sissy, But anyway, we finally got to reach that point, It's like when Harvey Milk put his arm around me and says, "Dave, I don't think you're ready to become a professional fairy, He said that exactly thing. And I thought, professional fairy, Jesus Christ, I was ready to, it was unbelievable. I almost had a heart attack then, But anyway, but my mom, so there's no way your son is a sissy. And my mom kept that in her head all these years. And when she was in the hospital, she says, "Dave, I want to read your book. I've never read your book." I says, "Mom, I sent you all kinds of book. I sent you me nude on the cover, for Christ's sake." I had a friend who took George DeRoe, was a famous photographer and a big jerk from Hollywood who owns Logo Television, Paul Councilman. You can quote me on that. He's a total idiot. He took the option on my book and thought, well, we'll give him a George Deroe nude on the cover. Well, George Deroe nudes were fabulous, and they're really, really great. And I was very proud to have a picture that looked that good in those days. But when you go to Harvard or Stanford or someone and have a stack of your George Deroe nudes on the cover, it's a little different than having a football picture on the cover, you know what I mean? Now, I'm not embarrassed about my body, but it's inappropriate, and I got talked into it. But, you know, we make mistakes, you know. But anyhow, folks, this hasn't been a mistake coming here. I've felt a lot of love here, and I really appreciate you coming. And I hope I've given some insight within your own families about my mom calling me her sissy boy. That was her way of saying to me that I love you, Dave, just as you are, as she died. And I really know that. And I know that in the bottom of my heart, because I didn't even begin to want to correct her, because all I did was laugh.
You never did mention your mom lived to be 100 years old.
Yes, she looked at me days before we took her to the hospital. Honest to God, the balloons were still hanging up there in her room. This was October 27th. She was 100 on September 10th. October 24th. No, she was in the hospital on October 22nd or something like that. But there was all these balloons that they had a dinner for all the people that month that had a birthday at this place, Solheim Lutheran Home. So there was like 5 or 6 people that had 80, 90, 75, you know. And there's my mom at 100. And she looked at me, she looked at the balloons, and she looked at me and she says, Dave, how could anybody be so stupid to want to be 100 years old? So she was something else, let me tell you. I might just do Don't Die Wondering now that she's dead. You know,